Declaration to supplement the 1994 Declaration on Measures to Eliminate International Terrorism. The General Assembly, guided by the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations, recalling the Declaration on Measures to Eliminate International Terrorism adopted by the General Assembly by its Resolution 4960 of 9 December 1994, recalling also the Declaration on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the United Nations. Deeply disturbed by the worldwide persistence of acts of international terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, including those in which states are directly or indirectly involved, which endanger or take innocent lives, have a deleterious effect on international relations and may jeopardize the security of states. Underlining the importance of states developing extradition agreements or arrangements is necessary in order to ensure that those responsible for terrorist acts are brought to justice. Noting that the Convention relating to the status of refugees, done at Geneva on the 28th of July 1951, does not provide a basis for the protection of perpetrators of terrorist acts, noting also in this context Articles 1, 2, 32 and 33 of the Convention, and emphasizing in this regard the need for states parties to ensure the proper application of the Convention. Stressing the importance of full compliance by states with their obligations under the provisions of the 1951 Convention 18 and the 1967 Protocol relating to the status of refugees, including the principle of non-refoulement of refugees to places where their life or freedom would be threatened on account of their race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group or political opinion, and affirming that the present declaration does not affect the protection afforded under the terms of the Convention and Protocol and other provisions of international law. Recalling Article 4 of the Declaration on Territorial Asylum adopted by the General Assembly by its Resolution 2312-22, of the 14th of December 1967, stressing the need further to strengthen international cooperation between states in order to prevent, combat and eliminate terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. Solemnly declares the following. 1. The states members of the United Nations solemnly reaffirm their unequivocal condemnation of all acts, methods and practices of terrorism as criminal and unjustifiable, wherever and by whomsoever committed, including those which jeopardize friendly relations among states and peoples and threaten the territorial integrity and security of states. 2. The states members of the United Nations reaffirm that acts, methods and practices of terrorism are contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations. They declare that knowingly financing, planning and inciting terrorist acts are also contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations. 3. The states members of the United Nations reaffirm that states should take appropriate measures in conformity with the relevant provisions of national and international law, including international standards of human rights, before granting refugee status, for the purpose of ensuring that the asylum seeker has not participated in terrorist acts, considering in this regard relevant information as to whether the asylum seeker is subject to investigation for or is charged with or has been convicted of offenses connected with terrorism and, after granting refugee status, for the purpose of ensuring that that status is not used for the purpose of preparing or organizing terrorist acts intended to be committed against other states or their citizens. 4. The states members of the United Nations emphasize that asylum seekers who are awaiting the processing of their asylum applications may not thereby avoid prosecution for terrorist acts. 5. The states members of the United Nations reaffirm the importance of ensuring effective cooperation between member states so that those who have participated in terrorist acts, including their financing, planning or incitement, are brought to justice. They stress their commitment, in conformity with the relevant provisions of international law, including international standards of human rights, to work together to prevent, combat and eliminate terrorism, and to take all appropriate steps under their domestic laws either to extradite terrorists or to submit the cases to their competent authorities for the purpose of prosecution. 6. In this context, and while recognizing the sovereign rights of states in extradition matters, states are encouraged, when concluding or applying extradition agreements, not to regard as political offenses excluded from the scope of those agreements offenses connected with terrorism which endanger or represent a physical threat to the safety and security of persons, whatever the motives which may be invoked to justify them. 7. States are also encouraged, even in the absence of a treaty, to consider facilitating the extradition of persons suspected of having committed terrorist acts, insofar as their national laws permit. 8. The states members of the United Nations emphasize the importance of taking steps to share expertise and information about terrorists, their movements, their support and their weapons, and to share information regarding the investigation and prosecution of terrorist acts.